And I would normally be in the kids area right now, but Travis lets me preach every now and then. So I'm with you guys this morning, which I really enjoy. I love being back with the kids though, because kids say funny things, especially like the really little kids. They get distracted really easily and they're hard to teach, but they are really funny. But I used to be a youth pastor before I came and joined the district church, before I joined Travis and the effort to plant this church and work here weekly. And we used to take our students on a mission trip every summer to Guatemala. And we would take our kids and we would hang out with orphans and we would put on BBS and we would just try to be a help to the missionary there. And I know that it's kind of, as I was a youth pastor, the more years I was there, the more I realized that sometimes missionaries or sometimes people who go on these trips, these short-term mission trips, they can do more damage than good sometimes. So we always wanted to try and just be there and be a help to the people who were there year-round, And so that's what we did. We took our students to Guatemala City. And the thing about Guatemala is that there is so much poverty. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to Guatemala, but it is a place with a terrible economy. And Guatemala is one of the most populated countries in South America. So there are people living everywhere. I mean, we would walk into some of these neighborhoods and there's some of the iconic pictures of you walk down an alleyway or a street and you see houses stacked on top of houses. And you just find people living all over the place. I mean, the inner city was packed. But then when you go outside the city, you find people living just wherever they can find a place to set up a cardboard box or their tin walls, and they would build their house there. Well, one day we were following the missionary while he was going on these house visits, and he was going around to people who either went to his church or people who he was just reaching out to, and he would pray with them, he would encourage them, and we went along, our youth group, and we would just play with the kids and kind of hang out. And I remember when we took a turn from this neighborhood and we went into the landfill. And Guatemala City is renowned for its gigantic landfill. It is a huge, you can see it as you're coming in on the plane and you're landing in Guatemala City. But there is garbage everywhere. And it's crazy because there are people even making their homes in the landfill. And you start walking into the landfill and the smell is very, very overwhelming. All right, because Guatemala is also very well known for fruit farming. They grow bananas and all kinds of melons, and when the fruit goes bad, they just toss it in the landfill, so that just mixes with all the garbage, and it makes a really, really strong smell. Like, I'm trying to be a good youth pastor and try not to look like I'm fazed by the smell, and my kid, like the kids are walking around, plugging their noses, and you're like, all right, come on, you have to try and keep it together. You don't want to offend anybody. It was hard though because the smell was just that strong. And we were going into the landfill and we turned and we just saw houses, like whole neighborhoods, people living in the landfill. And we went into this woman's home and she was this single mother with, I think she had 3 or 4 children. And we went past a sheet, you opened the sheet was their front door, we walked into the house and they were just like beaming. They were so excited to see these tall, white, strange people walk into their home. And it was incredible and it was incredibly humbling. I was always humbled wherever we went because the people were just so awesome. Like, you go as a missionary or as on a mission trip, you go with this expectation that you're just going to change lives. You're going to go in there and you're going to be this superhero missionary. But oftentimes I would leave feeling unworthy even to be in their presence. And we hung out there for a little bit, and then the pastor asked, how can I pray for you? He asked that to the single mom. She didn't have very many requests. She looked at him and smiled, and she said, pray for my children. The translator was telling us this. Pray for my children. But God has blessed me. And we were like, wait, what? Did she just say that? Did she just use the word blessed? Like, blessed wasn't the word that any of us would have used to describe her situation. Because we're from America, and we're used to lots of wealth. We're used to air conditioning, nice beds, And here we are in this home with a dirt floor for their floor and garbage everywhere, and that's the word she used. But she wasn't just trying to cover something up. She said that because she literally felt blessed. God has blessed us. And it really made me think about what that word means. I always hear people using that word. Back here in the States and probably all around the world, we use that word to imply that we've come upon some kind of good fortune. The word, like the literal meaning of the word, implies that you have happened upon some good fortune from divine authority. That God has made you happy somehow by either giving you something or doing something in your life. You are blessed. And so you see the hashtag blessed pop up whenever someone is feeling that good fortune. Whether it's because you got a pay raise, or you got a new job, or you were able to afford a bigger house, or something, or you just had a really good day, hashtag blessed. And I seriously just had to start to wonder what blessed even means, because I was wrestling with why she was using that word when most of us would not say that this woman was blessed. If you read the Gospels, Jesus will really make you rethink what it means to be blessed. You and Jesus might define the good life very differently. And a lot of times the things that he says about life, how to really be fully alive, are hard to hear. And they're hard to understand, really. But if you're committing to follow him, if you're committing to follow Jesus, you have to at least wrestle with his words. You have to open up the Gospels, and you have to read through his life and wrestle with what he says. You might disagree with it sometimes, but you have to at least consider it. And if you are committed to following Jesus, embrace his definition of what it means to be blessed. Embrace how Jesus defines what it means to have a blessed life, rather than conforming to what you see in our culture. Because our culture uses the word for all kinds of things, and happening upon some kind of good wealth or good fortune. But the word has a much deeper meaning than that. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is walking with his disciples, and he's just drawing massive crowds. People are following him from everywhere. And so he goes up on a mountainside, and he draws his disciples to himself, and he has them sit down, and then he goes through and he gives us the beatitudes. And the beatitudes are incredible. This is one of my favorite verses in all the Bible. Matthew chapter 5, verse 3 through 12. I'm going to read it in just a second. But it really, he goes through and he gives us all of these terms, these phrases about what it means to be blessed. If you Google the definition of beatitude, it would say supremely blessed. And we're going to take a closer look and see what Jesus says it means to be blessed. Verse 3, he starts out, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Notice what he doesn't say. Okay? Jesus doesn't come out and say, "Blessed are you who have your life completely put together." Jesus doesn't come out and say, "Blessed are you when you go to church every single Sunday. Blessed are you when you live a squeaky clean life and look good on the outside. He doesn't say, blessed are you who don't cuss or drink or smoke or do any of those kinds of things. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Jesus says. See, the things that he says, they kind of catch you off guard because of what you understand the word blessed to mean, because of what you've heard in our culture. You kind of expect him to say some of these other things that I've just said, but he says something so much deeper and so much more meaningful. And when you read the Beatitudes, you have to pay close attention because this is the heart of God for you. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Only the poor in spirit will inherit the kingdom of heaven. Well, what does that mean? What are the poor in spirit? Who are they? Wouldn't you rather be rich in spirit? That's kind of what I wonder when I read this verse. What does it mean? How about this question? What's the difference between someone who is poor and someone who is poor in spirit? Someone who is poor physically doesn't have the resources to provide for their physical needs. And someone who is poor spiritually doesn't have what they need to provide for themselves spiritually. People who are poor physically are unable to provide for their needs. Physically poor people live humbly, always needing to rely on others to provide for them. The poor in spirit are humble because they rely on God for everything. They are desperate for God. Billy Graham said it this way: if you put the word humble in place of the word poor, you might understand what he meant a little bit clearer. This is why the New Living Translation reads like this: you are blessed when you are poor and realize your need for God. You are blessed when you are poor and you realize your need for God. Jesus told a parable one day about a Pharisee and a tax collector who went to the temple to pray. Now, the Pharisee stood up in front of everyone and was praying out loud so that he could be heard by those standing around him. And he prayed like this: Lord, thank you so much for making me who I am. Thank you so much for giving me my wealth. And thank you that I am not like other men, like these dirty sinners over here. Thank you, Lord. And the tax collector stood way off to the side. And Jesus says that he couldn't even lift his head to heaven. But he kept his head down like this, and he kept pounding his chest and saying, Father, have mercy on me, a sinner. Jesus said the tax collector, rather than the Pharisee, went home justified before God because of his honest prayer before God. Let me ask you this question: how much do you need God? We'll all answer that question differently. Some of us feel like we could get by in life without him just fine. I mean, we've gotten this far without him. So why would I need him? And others of us are so aware of how sinful we've been, of how many mistakes we've made, that we know that we can't live life unless we're connected to God. And I don't mean like unless we go to church or read the Bible or pray or whatever. I'm saying we can't last, we can't survive without God. We feel so desperate for him. When you feel that weakness and that loss of life, when you are disconnected from God, you are starting to feel poor in spirit. When you feel poor and not rich without God, you have started to feel poor in spirit. Verse 4, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Do you mourn? Many of us mourn. Many of us have lost people in our lives, or many of us have had terrible slights. People have done mean things to us, and we mourn those things. We mourn things that happen to us. And as much as God in heaven gives us plenty of space to mourn when things happen to us, I think that Jesus wants us to mourn the things that God mourns. God mourns. Did you know that? God mourns oppression and sin. It makes him weep. You see, all throughout the scriptures, God's heart is broken by sin. And we don't know what that even would be like, to cry over sin. Many of us have never wept over something that we've done, and some of us have. Many of us have. But God mourns sin. In James chapter 4, verse 8, James writes this: "Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you." But many of us don't take the time to slow down and even look our sin in the face. Because life gets so busy sometimes. And we get so busy at work, we get so busy with friends or family. And we don't really know how to approach our sin. Like, we know we've done bad things, but we don't really know how to talk about it or what to do about it. Many of us just kind of push it under the rug and act like it's not there. But Jesus said, blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who mourn for their shortcomings, for you will be comforted. God doesn't want you to just stay in mourning, but he wants you to mourn what he mourns, and he'll be there to comfort you, and he'll be there to pick you up when you mourn. And God also mourns those who are lost without him. It makes him weep to see people perish who didn't know him. Verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. To be meek is to be quiet and gentle, easily imposed on. Now, meekness is not something I think that our culture looks up to very much, right? Someone who is meek is kind of like a pushover. Or that's what kind of comes to mind when you think of someone meek. You think of someone who is quiet and gentle and who doesn't fight back. But Jesus says it's the meek who are able to sit and wait on the Lord to act for them. Can you get that? The meek are able to sit and wait, no matter what's happening to them, and quietly, patiently wait for the Lord to act on their behalf. Whenever I think of meekness, I always think of the movie The Man of Steel. You guys seen that movie? Superman is in the bar, and this little guy, I don't know why this guy's picking on him, but this guy is flirting with a girl, and Superman steps up to the girl, and he's just standing there looking at this little dude, and the dude pours a beer on his head. You guys remember this scene? And Superman he's just like sitting there, like he closes his eyes. I think he probably clenches his fist, but he does nothing. He doesn't fight back. And the guy is like egging him on more, and he just comes up to Superman and pushes him, and he like stumbles backwards because he's Superman. He couldn't knock him over. But that's always what I picture when I think of meekness. Like, Superman could have crushed the dude with one punch, but he was strong enough to restrain himself and just look at the guy. You know, for us it's the same way. Like, maybe we're not huge and strong, but we have a God who is huge and strong and perfectly capable to take on whatever challenge is facing you in your life. And when you believe that, and you are able to live a meek, quiet, gentle life, you will be blessed when he acts on your behalf and fulfills you and satisfies you in ways you've never felt before. Blessed are those who are meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, verse 6. For they shall be satisfied. I love that he uses hunger and thirst here, these words, because those are words that we feel every day. I mean, you get hungry and thirsty all day, every day. And it's true that when you get hungry and thirsty, you don't just hunger and thirst for food and water, right? Have you guys ever been hungry and thirsty for anything else in life? Hungry for success, hungry for a good reputation, hungry for professional goals, or hungry for people's approval. Jesus was so aware that just like food, everything that you can be hungry for in life and chase after in life, it can fill you and you can fill yourself with that, but it won't satisfy you. And this is why Jesus, when he's out in the desert, and he's being tempted by Satan, Jesus has been in the desert for 40 days. And he hasn't eaten anything. And Satan pops up and he points to a rock and he says, hey, if you're so hungry, why don't you turn that stone into a piece of bread and eat? Fill yourself. And Jesus looks up at Satan and says, haven't you heard? Man doesn't live by bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Do you believe that? If that's true, if we don't really live just on bread alone or on success or on a good reputation or comfort or whatever it is, but on every word that God speaks, we should be filling ourselves with his words. And we should be hungry and thirsty for his righteousness. Righteousness is a word that confuses lots of people. Righteousness. I mean, when you hear righteousness, you think of like goodness, purity, kindness, whatever. I read this really great definition of the word righteousness. That righteousness is being in right relationship with God. Are you hungry for a right relationship with God? Are you hungry and thirsty to know God like you've never known him before? When you are, he'll satisfy you. And you'll feel a satisfaction and a fullness that you've never felt before. Blessed are the hungry and the thirsty for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, he says in verse 7. Are you a merciful person? Are you quick to let things go when someone does something to you? Or do you like to get payback? Payback and revenge are very common human feelings. I mean, that's what all the good movies are about in Hollywood, right? I mean, every good movie that you've ever seen, like the good action movies, are about guys who get revenge for something bad happening in their family. But Jesus said, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And you have to slow down and think that if you want God, or if you expect, or if you believe that God is going to be merciful to you for the ways that you've messed up or the things that you've done, are you willing to be merciful to other people? It doesn't make sense to receive tons and tons and tons of mercy from God at one moment, and then turn around and like shake your fist at people and snarl at them and get angry at them and abuse them and call them names and do stuff like that when God has been so merciful to you. Blessed are the merciful, he says, because they will be shown mercy. Verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart. Here's a verse you should memorize this week, if you're all about memorizing verses. 1 Samuel 16, verse 7, just the very end of the verse. Man looks on the outward appearance. Do you see that at the bottom? The final 3 lines. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. You should write that on a piece of paper and just stick it on your mirror and try and commit it to memory. This will help you understand your relationship with God so much more. See, in our relationships with each other, we can totally put on a smile if our day's going bad, and we can fool people. If we're angry at someone, like, we can just smile and like, hey, how are you doing? Like, you can just act like you're not angry and you can just get away with it. But with God, he sees your heart. He sees what's going on inside you. He knows your heart and your thoughts. So we still do that, though. We still try and put on a face, and we try and hide sin, and we try and act like everything's cool, especially at church, right? Because when you go to church, especially at church, you have to look like you have it all together. But Jesus didn't say, blessed are those who have it all together. He said, blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are those who open up their heart and give it to God and just tell God what's happening. One way of practicing a pure heart is to just be open. Be transparent. You know what that word means? Can people see inside you the way God does? Can you show people what's going on? A lot of us don't like that. We don't like to tell people what we're struggling with because we feel like we're so dirty and messed up. And the church has kind of had a bad reputation for that reason. We don't know how to react to people when they tell us about what they do or what their lifestyle is like. But Jesus said that we should be pure in heart, open, honest. Because when you do that, you will see God. When you live with a pure heart, you will see God. Blessed are the pure in heart. Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Wherever God moves, his peace goes with him. If you are children of God, peace will follow you too. Are you a peacemaker? Does peace come with you? Do people feel peace from you? Let me ask you this question. This is a really good question to ask ourselves from time to time. What is it like to be the person across from you? What is it like to be the person across from you? Are you easy to have a conversation with? Or do you get mad at people when they don't agree with you? Do you like to argue with people? Like, are you one of those kinds of people who just gets on social media just looking for an argument, looking for someone who disagrees with your political view or your religious view, and you just like to bash them and try and make them look stupid? Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. Peace is such a great feeling. Have you ever felt peace in your life? I believe that peace comes from the presence of God. That when you're really close with God, you feel this peace, this calmness, this shalom is the Greek word. But it means it's a lack of chaos, it's a lack of anxiety, total peace. And when we are children of God and we practice peace and we seek to have peace with people, we share that peace and that goodness of God with others. And they feel peace. Not contempt or argument or whatever. Verse 10, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness. When you follow Jesus and commit to living with him, there are going to be people who disagree with you. And now, don't misunderstand this. People are going to disagree with you because you follow Jesus, not because you're a jerk. Sometimes Christians can be jerks, right? But Jesus wasn't saying that. Like, Jesus wasn't saying be a snooty jerk who makes everybody upset and persecutes you. Jesus was saying, when you follow me, people are going to reject you. Because you know what? They rejected me too. The people who followed Jesus, several of them turned their backs and left because they just couldn't get what he was saying. And every now and then, you were going to come across someone in your life who was going to laugh at you. Who was going to disagree with you and say, I don't agree. And that's not such a bad thing. I mean, pray for that person, of course. But sometimes people are going to put you down because of what you believe. And that, as strange as it sounds, it's a good thing. Because it'll prove to you that you are on a narrow path. Jesus said, wide is the path that leads to destruction, and many take it. But narrow is the path to righteousness, to the kingdom of heaven. And very few people find it. You will run into people who disagree with your point of view of life. I made up a beatitude. Those are the 8. Those are the 8 that Jesus said. And I love them. I challenge you to, like the 1 Samuel verse, to write down these beatitudes and think about them. And really wrestle with them. And really try to embrace Jesus' definition of what it means to be blessed. And I guarantee if you consider it, and if you really pray about it, and if you really try to commit to memory, you'll know exactly what Jesus is talking about. You'll feel it in your life. You'll feel blessed. But I made up my own beatitude. And now this isn't so, I'm not trying to add to the scriptures, but I just wanted to make one that we could kind of all think about the underlying theme, the main, I think, topic of all of the beatitudes. This is kind of the purpose of what Jesus is trying to get at with all of his beatitudes. Here's my beatitude. Blessed are you when you won't let anything stand between you and God. Blessed are you when you won't let anything stand between you and God. What is it for you? Every single person on the face of the earth has something standing between them and God. All of us do, because no one's perfect and no one lives a perfectly clean life. Is it pride? Are you so proud of who you are right now and you just can't imagine humbling yourself and following Christ? Is it your professional goals? Your job? Is it money? Do you think right now that you can't have both God and money, and right now you just don't want to part with money? I can't part with the place that I want to be in my life. Is it a grudge? An argument? Maybe that you've been having with someone for so long. Maybe they don't even know that you have the grudge, but you just can't let it. You can't let it go. You can't show mercy. Is it your appetite for a bad habit that you had in your former life, or when you were younger? Is there a bad habit, a sin habit that you just can't let go of? All of these things pile up in our lives, and they feel like these gigantic obstacles, and we don't really know how to move past them. We don't know how to get rid of them so that we can be with God. But you are blessed if you can humbly look up to God and cry out to Him, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Because the truth is, all of us have to just realize that none of us are better than the worst of sinners. None of us. Not one person. So we all need to come to a place where we're humble and we just look up to heaven and say, Father, have mercy on me. I want to walk with you. I want to know you like I never have before. Can you humbly look at Him and say that? To be blessed is to live life in the presence of God. That's why that woman in Guatemala City was able to say, I'm blessed. Because she lived life in the presence of God. And she couldn't imagine ditching God for anything. What is stopping you from living life in the presence of the living God and really experiencing life to the full that Jesus came to give us? Jesus, thank you so much for saying all these things, the beatitudes. I'm learning that the beatitudes are the attitudes of blessed people. That if we can commit ourselves to live the way you taught us to, we really will be blessed. It'll be hard. It'll be hard to turn away from habits that we used to have. But we will be blessed when we treat people the way you treat people. And we'll be blessed when we are poor in spirit, when we admit to ourselves and to others that we're not perfect, that we don't have everything together. But you do, God. You are, like the scriptures teach us, you are holy. But you're so full of righteousness and love and kindness and grace and mercy that the moment that we choose to just admit to you that we're imperfect and that we're messed up, you are right there to meet us where we are. Every single person in this room and in the world. Thank you so much, Father, for sending your Son Jesus to make a way for us to know you, not just through his teachings and his words and his miracles, Father, but by giving his own life. Like the video said at the beginning, some of us, we have a hard time understanding what that means. But ultimately, Father, you considered every single person in this room worth dying for. And you let Jesus go to that awful place, the grave, on our behalf so that we could know you, Lord. Help us to do what we can to walk closer to you today, to learn more about you, and to really enter into a relationship with you, Father. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.